Okay, welcome, assessment directors. Hopefully we've got a bunch of you participating out there. This is Darren Nielsen, and I'm happy to be with you for a little bit of time today. We also have Anne Michelle, who's going to spend the bulk of the time going over the slides of today's presentation. And then, Emily, are you going to be? And then Emily Barry will take some things as well. So things are moving along with the world of assessment, and I'm going to spend just a minute talking a little bit about some things that have happened since our assessment directors meeting in November. You might recall at that meeting we talked a little bit about some information that had come from our most recent TAC meeting, and the Center for Assessment, who we contract with to provide technical services to the state. They had brought up the idea of being able to provide additional support to LEAs who are looking at trying to determine if they can use some of their locally developed assessments to measure student growth. So we sent out just a brief survey, and we were able to get responses from 30 assessment directors. And you'll see, let me actually go to the next slide. These were the questions that we had, and we allowed you to respond to multiple of these, so that's why it doesn't all add up to 30. We have 30 total respondents, but we have more than 30 responses. Being provided with written guidelines and recommended approaches. We do have the technical manuals. We could provide those documents to all of the assessment directors, was the #1 response. And then we also had a fair number of assessment directors who would like to have some time at a future assessment directors meeting where we could have one of the consultants do some training face-to-face. And so I think our responses are high enough there that the next time I visit with the Center for Assessment, which actually will be next week, they'll be here in Utah to help us as we continue to work on finalizing the contract for the 3rd through 8th grade a statewide assessment system. And so we will put on a future agenda item the opportunity for probably at the end of a meeting, so those who are not interested could leave, and those who would like to get more information and training in this area could participate in that. So I thank you, the 30 of you who took time to fill out that response, and we'll take some action based on that. Whoops. Click the right thing. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is you're probably all aware, or if you're not all aware, you should be aware that the State Board of Education has recently, on December 1st, released the RFP for the 9th and 10th grade high school assessment. That RFP, because it's released, is now a public document, and on this slide there is a hyperlink to where you can go out and view the RFP. I wanted to make this available to assessment directors because we're still in a position that we can make some modifications to that, even though it's live right now. We can take into consideration additional input if there's something you see that is it needs to be brought to our attention. The document is housed in Microsoft 365, and there are some LEAs who block that access to that link. If that's the case in your LEA, I would encourage you to do one of two things if you're interested in viewing the RFP. One would be to communicate with your IT department and see if they will provide an exception for you. Another one would be for you to view this outside of your school network, at home or in some other venue where you could look at the RFP. And again, we're interested in getting feedback. You'll notice the parts in the RFP, there are some things that are legislated. We also have federal requirements, namely that the assessment is linked or connected to our state standards. So look that over if you're interested in that this kind of document. It takes some detailed reading to get through it, but we would appreciate feedback. And you can send those, any comments that you have about that, you can send those to me at darren.nielsen@schools.utah.gov. I think that's all that I've got, and I'm going to turn the time over to Anne Michelle. Rebecca Peterson is unavailable today, and Anne Michelle's agreed to cover the information that she's provided on ECT. I'm going to compliment Rebecca publicly. She's very detailed in the work that she does, and I think you'll be able to find the answers to nearly all of your questions in the materials that she provides to you. And she's also very willing to provide individual support if necessary as we move forward with statewide administration of the ACT test. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. And again, I hope that you'll take the information you're receiving from our section and it's beneficial to you in the work that you're doing in your schools and LEAs.
Thank you.
Anne?
All right. Good afternoon, folks. It's nice to be with you. I'm Anne Michelle Neal, the Accountability Specialist in the Assessment Department here at USBE, and I also work with WIDA Assessment. As Darren mentioned, I'm going to cover the ACT information for Rebecca. I'll try to answer questions as they come up. However, I think that Rebecca likely will be able to provide you with more thorough answers. So feel free to type your questions into the chat box. We're going to make a record of those, and then Rebecca will be able to answer them when they come back. So what are some important ACT dates coming up? We're going to talk about what you should have already completed and what is coming up next to prepare for ACT. By now, you should have completed managing your participation in Pearson Access Next. And this means that you need to make sure that your school understands that we are doing ACT writing this year. Rebecca is still getting questions from schools about whether or not they are doing ACT writing, and the answer is yes, we are administering ACT writing this year. You can share the ACT writing fact sheet with your schools. The hyperlink as well as the URL is there for you to share out with those that you work with. Rebecca noted that we've made significant progress on applying for student ACT accommodations. I know it's something that Rebecca is very passionate about, and thank you for hearing and receiving and following the directions that she's been so willing to share about applying for accommodations for those students who need them, such as English learners and students with special needs. She wants you to shoot for finishing those applications for accommodations before winter break, though the hard deadline is January 12th. Refer to the newly released ACT Allowable Accessibility Supports document. I believe that's been shared with you by Rebecca. And share those things with your special ed directors as well as your ESL coordinators so that you're all working together, that everybody's on the same page as far as what needs to be submitted in order for the students to get those accommodations that they need for ACT. So coming up next, you will need to make sure that your technology requirements and installations are complete. Meet and verify those requirements by January 12th. There's a link here to the technical requirements for online testing. There's also a process for verifying that the technology is working correctly. It's important to make sure that those systems are in place so they function when students come to take the assessment. You'll need to review the testing coordinator's manual for any changes and updates. This is now posted on the Utah's ACT website. Prepare school testing schedules and plan test proctor trainings that you may need to give so that the schedules are in place and people are prepared to proctor the test. Verify that your student information is correct starting December 19th in Pearson Access. So you know that all the students who you plan to test are ready and in the system so that that process can go smoothly. The deadline again is January 12th for verifying, but that window opens December 19th. The instructions for this are in the Pearson Access Next Users Manual. Again, this is posted on our ACT website. Rebecca wanted to add a note about protecting student privacy and how we will meet Utah's FERPA requirements in administering the ACT. So just some background information about Utah and FERPA. FERPA refers to Utah's Family Educational Rights to Privacy Act. It requires parent permission for collecting certain data, protected information such as family income or religious affiliation. There are 2 questions on the ACT that refer to student profile information, that is protected information under FERPA. So to comply with Utah's FERPA law, the Attorney General reviewed the requirements and provided the following guidance. ACT will provide us with supplemental instructional materials for testing proctors to use during the administration of the student information booklet. So to simplify, ACT is going to send alternate instruction manuals for testing proctors so that student information booklets are filled out correctly. The instructional manual directs students not to answer question 59 and 62. These are the 2 questions that violate Utah's FERPA. Data will be masked for 59 and 62 so that no data is reported to the state. This means that if a student does happen to fill out the question for the answer for 59 or question 62, that data won't be reported to our state, districts or schools. So there's kind of a double plan, or a 2-pronged plan for addressing this need. We're going to be provided with alternate instruction manuals for testing proctors, and ACT will not report the data that they receive for those 2 questions. So what does this mean? Instruct your test administrators, test coordinators, and proctors to use the supplemental instruction manual for the student information booklet. I am positive that Rebecca will send clear and adequate instructions so that everybody understands how to do this correctly. The supplemental instructions will be emailed to testing coordinators from ACT and posted to Utah's ACT website in January. That's all you have to do, is to instruct your test administrators and proctors to use the alternate instructions for filling out the student information booklet. We also have created an ACT email list. This is for updates and information pertaining to ACT only. It's a new communication opportunity. So in response to requests for emailed information about ACT, we're going to create an ACT email list. This can be for anyone who would like to receive ACT-related information and updates. Assessment directors, coordinators, counselors, curriculum directors, principals, teachers, etc. This is sent in addition to the AD memo. It will include the information that's shared in the AD memo for those who do not receive the AD memo, but it will also provide a way for Rebecca to share additional information to those people who are interested in ACT updates. So who's on the list? ACT district and school testing coordinators have already been added to this list for ACT updates. To have names added to the email list, email Emily Sweeten and request to be added to the ACT email list. Also, if you do not want to receive these emails, you can also email Emily Sweeten to be removed from the list. But please share this broadly, as it's a way for you to communicate clearly with us and with those in your LEA, and down to whatever level of interest there is for ACT. Who can join the list? Anyone who wants to receive regular updates about ACT. Like I mentioned, please share this opportunity with people within your LEAs in school who you think would like to be added to the email list. One more thing about ACT is we want you to share your expertise. What do you wish you would have known in prior years? And so we need your input. Share your input, your expertise by sharing one idea. What do you wish you would have known is kind of a guiding question for what you might share. Share something that has worked well in preparing your school, your LEA, your teachers, for preparing students. That's an important piece, preparing parents for ACT Day. Take just a minute to answer the survey. It's a quick one idea survey. You can see the hyperlink and also the URL. And Share something that has worked for you or that you wish you would have known or thought of as a new testing coordinator or AD. The survey really will only take a minute or two and is a place for us to compile a collection of good ideas that we can share with everyone else. Upcoming trainings, how do you get more help and information about ACT? There is an ACT sponsored training on January 18th. It's from 12:30 to 2:30 in Basement West. The topic will be around test administration and it will be available on WebEx. USBE will be providing some trainings in addition to the ACT sponsored trainings. One really important training is preparing students for the ACT through core instruction. This is outside of ACT prep classes or ACT preparation, other things, but how do we use core instruction to prepare students for the ACT? This will be held on December 12th from 9 to 11 at USBE and also on January 9th from 9 to 11 at USBE, and the registration link is below. The second training we'll be offering is called Preparing for Smooth Sailing on Test Administration Day. Proctoring prep, new test administrators, etc. How to make sure that everything goes smoothly. This will be held on January 10th from 1 to 3 p.m. and the registration link is below also. So if you have any questions or suggestions, please email Rebecca Peterson directly. She's out of the office today spending some time with her family, but she is, as Darren mentioned, very detailed, very thorough, and wants to know how best to support you and what questions you have, so please don't hesitate to contact Rebecca. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit more about SAGE administration for English learners. We introduced this a few months ago, so this is not the first time you've heard this, but I'm going to give you some additional information about SAGE administration for students who are identified as English learners for 2017-2018. So to be clear, this change will take place with this year's SAGE administration. The basic principle is that all EL students will take all 3 tests. There's one exception. If the student enrolls in the U.S. after April 15th, 2018, that student does not need to test. This is the student who moves into the United States for the very first time in the middle of the testing window. They do not need to test, but if they enroll before April 15th, we do expect them to test. So in their first year of enrollment, the ELA Science and Math SAGE test will count for participation only. In the second year, it counts for growth only, and in the third year, it counts for both achievement and growth. Why is this change taking place? It's because of Utah's ESSA state plan. I introduced this idea in an AD webinar I think last month, but I wanted to clarify more. In ESSA consolidated template, states were provided with 3 options for testing recently arrived English learners in the state. Our state chose the second of those options, and you can see highlighted here that Utah will assess recently arrived English learners in English language arts and mathematics beginning in their first year of enrollment. It is, as you can see, that second allowance. The first option was to exclude students from ELA assessment in their first year, but math and science assessments would have to be included in growth and proficiency. Based on stakeholder input and our EL work group, we felt that it was more fair to test ELA in their first year and count them for participation and to establish a baseline than it was to hold them to growth and proficiency standards. These recently arrived English learners are excluded from proficiency and growth calculations and accountability in the first year of enrollment. They are included in growth calculations in the second year and included in growth and proficiency in the third year of enrollment and thereafter. There's a link in the bottom corner of this slide to our ESSA state plan. This information is on pages 11 and 12. So what's the purpose? Again, assessing ELA, math and science in the first year of enrollment establishes a baseline for calculating growth in the following year. All three subjects need to be tested so that we can measure growth. If you think about the progress an English learner makes from their first year and their second year in the US, you're going to see a lot of growth. So there's an advantage in accountability to administering this assessment. First year students are counted in participation only. And again, the participation requirements are that students complete at least 6 questions or there's a non-blank character in an essay. This change, to be clear, is going to occur this year, 2017-2018, in order to be in compliance with ESSA. We expect feedback from the Department of Education in the next several weeks. We may need to provide a response, but as this was an allowable plan for assessing first-year ELs, we don't feel that there will be any questions or pushback, and so we're moving forward with making plans so that if the ESSA state plan is approved in March or in February or April, we'll be in compliance with our proposal for assessing English learners. I want to remind you about the accountability system, that 37% of elementary middle schools are growth and 25% for high schools is a growth measure. So it's a fair and reasonable to count them for participation in their first year. It will be an advantage for growth in the second year, and then they won't be held to proficiency standards until their third year. Special codes do apply. I was listening during the last AD meeting and someone asked about special codes, so I thought I would introduce it here. So those students who enroll after April 15th will still use the special code of 103. Those students are exempt and don't need to test. EL students in their first year who enrolled before April 15th, you'll still use the special code of 104. And this means that ELA, math and science will be counted for participation only. In their second year, we have to create a new special code. This is a new condition. We're looking at the special code of 205, but until that has been decided, I'm going to leave it as to be determined. This means that those students will be counted for participation and growth. And in their third year, they will become standard participants, special code 200 in participation, proficiency, and growth. I know there's a lot of concern, and it's valid concern for supporting, how do we support first-year English learners in taking state assessments? I've pulled from an article that I really like by Diane Filler called Fair and Square Assessment for English Learners, published in Educational Leadership in 2016. The first strategy is, she says, to make sure and to choose appropriate accommodations for state assessments. This might be additional time, alternate setting, repeating instructions. We have updated the accommodations policy and it is coming soon to the website. I'll be sure to share that with you when that is in place, but it does reflect this change in assessment and when to assess English learners. Strategy 2 is to prepare students for computer-based assessments. This is a good strategy for any student. Of course, we don't want to put students in a testing environment they've never seen before. So things like Sage Interim or practice tests are very helpful. Explicitly teach students how to use the tools available, such as text-to-speech or the translation dictionary or the highlighter. If they've never seen those tools before, they're of no benefit. So make sure to explicitly teach students how to use those things that are meant to help them and meant to support them to do their best on the assessment. Strategy 3 is to use English language proficiency scores to plan. So by the time you administer SAGE, you should have screener scores or read access scores. This can help you plan which accommodations are appropriate. For example, if a student has a strength in listening, you can plan accommodations that really utilize that student's strength in listening to do their best on the ELA tests such as, or math, such as screen reader. Utilize those scores that you know from WIDA to put them in the best position possible. And also, this is a strategy I added myself, but have high expectations and a can-do mindset for your students. WIDA's can-do philosophy emphasizes a strong inclusion and equity mindset. Don't set up the belief that these students can't perform. Instead, think about what they can do, and that this is a good opportunity for students to, again, just establish a baseline so that in the second year they can demonstrate growth, but don't have expectations ahead of time about their limitations. Instead, think about their strengths and what they can do. All right, I'm going to give this to Emily to talk about a UTREX update.
Good afternoon. Here's some more information on what's going to happen with the December 1 data submission. So USBE is not going to turn off the UTREX data collectors in December. Right now we're working on finalizing a process that will allow the LEAs to identify your guys' December 1 UTREX submission. And as soon as we have that up and ready to go, we'll send out information on how you guys can do that. If you are ready to submit your data right now, you can email the UTREX help desk and they will assist you in submitting your data. Just know that if you go this route, it might take a couple of hours, especially if you get behind a larger district that they're processing before you call in. Some LEAs have decided to pause or turn off their UTREX submission already. If you have, leave them off until you contact the UTREX help desk and then verify that your submission has been finalized before you turn your data back on. If you have not turned off your UTREX submissions, you don't need to. You can keep those up and running until you're ready to submit your final data. When you are, if you haven't received the training information, contact the UTREX help desk. If you have, then you can go through the process of finalizing it. Just be aware that if you're continuing to submit UTREX data for assessments, it's going to continue submitting and it's going to override previous submissions, which could change your December 1 data. So you have to make the call on what you want to do there. December 11th, 5 p.m., if you guys have not contacted us or submitted a final December 1 data submission, we are going to automatically finalize the last submitted data that we received in UTREX. So just be sure that if you have data that you want submitted, you either need to contact the UTREX help desk or go through the finalized process when we give that information to you, so that whatever data you want to be sent to us is what we put into the system. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you again for joining us. And I hope you have a good afternoon and are having a lovely winter season, and we will see you soon.